Welcome back, fellow Common fans, to another edition of the Common Fan Podcast. Quick reminder to follow the podcast on your streaming platform of choice. Follow us on Twitter at CommonFanGBR. And if you want to send us an email, we'd love to hear from you. That's commonfangbr@gmail.com. I am TJ Burkle, as always, alongside Matty Owens Sr. and Geoff in Lincoln. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, TJ.
Today, boys, is a monumental day for the Common Fan Podcast. We are so excited to have our first ever guest on the show, and even more excited by who that guest is. He has nearly 30 years of experience as a TV and radio broadcaster. He is a former co-host of Unsportsmanlike Conduct, the #1 afternoon show in Omaha. He founded the Bottom Line radio show at the Omaha World-Herald. He is the former host of Severe and Benning in the morning on 1620 The Zone. He currently serves as the executive director of the Jet Award Foundation, as well as the host of the weekly podcast, The Let It Fly Show, and the host of Big Red Wrap-Up. Apparently, the only thing he does not do is sleep. Joining us now is Mike'l Severe. Mike'l, how are you?
I'm great. I'm doing really well. I love these. The fan podcasts are great. And I was just talking about it with somebody yesterday over at Herdat. They're all over the place, and people love them, and a lot of them have gotten traction. So I think it's really cool.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us and appreciate you saying that. One thing that's not in your bio, at least online, but I want to make sure to mention, as we are mere weeks from Veterans Day, you're also a veteran, correct?
Yes, U.S. Army. I was So I went in because I couldn't do school. You know that whole thing? You go to college and you don't do very well. And I was working 2 jobs, and I was doing very poorly, like 0.0, whatever, grade point average. So yeah, I walked into the MEPS on a day with a buddy of mine, and he didn't go, and I did. And I was a helicopter maintenance guy, and loved it. It completely changed my life. It gave me direction, made me a much better man.
That's super cool. Thank you for your service.
Yes,
Obviously.
thank you for your service, Mike'l.
What kind of places, where did that take you? Where were you stationed?
Well, I was in Fort Rucker, Alabama, because I started off with the Huey, which I loved, great helicopter. And then I ended up going to Virginia because I moved over to the Apache. I did the Apache for a while. So I was anywhere from Kentucky to Alabama to Virginia. Also did a TDY over in Germany because they do a cold weather training on the helicopter over there to make sure no matter where we're fighting, we're good to go. After having to go down, we went to Panama years ago as a country to fight, and we didn't realize that the humidity would affect the avionics of our helicopters. So after that, they started making sure that they would do trainings in all different kinds of environments. And the one over in Germany was a cold weather training that we did over there for 12 weeks. So did a little bit of travel. It was pretty cool. I did not go to Desert Storm. I got the uniform, I got the name tags, but it lasted 100 hours at that time. So didn't make it over there. And I was out by the time, of course, 9/11 stuff happened. So
there's a lot going on in the world. Are your helicopter maintenance skills up to date? Just in case.
I can still fix a Huey. The great thing about working on something like an Apache or any of the modern helicopters, they're all compartmental. So you just pull a piece out, send it off, they fix it, you put it back in as a maintenance guy. The Apache, the Huey, you actually got in there and you cotter pinned and you safety wired and you fix stuff. They don't necessarily do that nowadays.
Good old fashioned American. That's awesome. So, Mike'l, we're excited to hear more about the art of the punt return and your work at the Jet Award Foundation. But we'd love to hear a little bit about how you ended up in Nebraska and ended up doing sports media. I know you're not from the state originally, and I think you started, after the Army, you started doing local news, but not necessarily sports. Is that right?
Yeah. So when I got out of the Army, I went straight to college. I was living in Houston, went back to Houston, Spring, Texas, actually. And when I got there, a buddy of mine that I had worked with years before when he was a high schooler said, "Hey, I'm up at Sam Houston State. I'm doing radio, television, film. You should come up and visit and hang out." I had no desire I didn't even know if I was going to go back to college or not. And I went up there for the weekend and hung out with everybody. I was like, this is really cool. So I went back to a community college in Spring, North Harris Community College, did a year there, got my grades to where I could transfer to Sam. And then I was passionate at that point. I took 25, 27, 23 hours back to back. I graduated in 2.5 semesters, essentially just taking crazy amounts of hours, also while working a weekend job in New Orleans doing sports producing for a station that I had interned in. So I was very busy. I never slept. And then when I got out of school, I got a job in Monroe, Louisiana. And it was my first job, and it was news basically to start off with. But I did 2 days where I would go to the media days. So we had Louisiana Tech and Grambling were the two schools we covered. So we would go to there. I had a chance to talk to Coach Eddie Robinson every Tuesday for 2 years. It was one of the greatest times of my life.
That is amazing.
We almost never talked football. We talked everything else. But we never talked his team. We talked past and everything else, and it was amazing.
That's so cool.
Yeah, did that for 2 years, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I realized that there's only 2 or 3 sports jobs in every market, so I probably should stick more to news. And so I got a job offer in Albuquerque to go there and be the education reporter. Me, the guy who couldn't deal it with it, college, ended up as the education reporter in Albuquerque, which was awesome because New Mexico is anywhere from 49th to 51st in education every year. So I got a lot of stories to do. I learned a lot, met a lot of great people. Albuquerque is one of the nicest places to live. There's some violence issues at times in certain parts of the city, but it's beautiful. And we have Balloon Fiesta and we have breakfast burritos every day. It was incredible. And then I was dating my wife, who actually was going to Tulane University in New Orleans. And then she moved with me to Albuquerque, and we were there for a couple of years. And her mother, who's from here, and my wife Chris from here, got ill. She had cancer, and so she came back to help take care of her. And so after about 6 months, I thought, okay, I need to poop or get off the pot with this woman who my girlfriend at the time. Do I want to go to follow her to Omaha? Knew nothing really a lot about Omaha. I knew market size it was. It was 40 market sizes smaller than where I was in Albuquerque, so I didn't have to take a big pay cut. But I had a contact here who was the news director there at Channel 7, and it was the same media group. We were Pulitzer and then Hearst. So I contacted her, and I said, hey, do you have a job opening? And she's like, seriously, I have a morning job opening, but you're going to take a real big pay cut. I was like, yeah, but I got to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, and my girlfriend's there. And so I took the job and came to Omaha in 2002, got married in 04, had my first kid in 05. He had severe pun. He had some real medical issues. No better place to live in the country than to be living here in Omaha with medical issues, especially if it involves hearing or any kind of facial stuff. And so as we have Boys Town and we have Med Center, all that. Yeah. So we ended up staying, and I've been here 21 years now. Never planned on being here, never planned on doing sports talk radio. I never planned on any of that. It just all just happened,
That's so cool. Did you make the conscious choice, like, I want to do sports, I want to transition to sports, or was there an opening that kind of sort of aligned with good timing or something like that?
Yeah, I was doing the morning show over at Channel 7, which is great. Going to work at 2:30 in the morning every day, and had great coworkers. And I got a call from Neil Nelkin over at 1620 The Zone. He actually called for John Oakey, who was the morning anchor at Channel 7, and say, hey, you work in the mornings. We have an afternoon spot. It was Kevin and Bob in the afternoon, Kevin Kugler and Bob Bruce. And Bob was leaving. He was moving, and he needed somebody to be that replacement for Bob. And Kevin had worked for almost 6 months by himself, as they had tried out everybody from producers from the Rome show, believe it or not, to everybody they had tried out. And so I went in, they said, well, Mike'l's available, and all he does in the afternoon is play golf. So why don't he So I went in, and
you got time. I was going to say, you got time.
Yeah, I had time. Yeah. And so I went in, I did an hour with Kevin, and they picked me to be his co-host. And that was it. I'd never thought about doing it or planned on doing it. It just so happened that Kevin had an opening and he liked working with me, and that was it.
So you and Kugler go back a ways then, because my initial experience with you, Mike'l, is mostly listening to you and Kevin doing sportsmanlike conduct. So you guys were your years of experience together before you even kind of started doing that, huh?
Yeah, Unsportsmanlike Conduct I got in with him in 04. Unsportsmanlike Conduct started in 01. It was really the first real local radio show that was going on in town. Everything else was national, and one in Lincoln. And then I got with him in 04, and then we worked together until Kevin went national in 2010. And then I worked with John Bishop for a few years, and then I left to go to the paper. But yeah, Kevin and I worked together for a little bit over 8 years. It was a great time, man. I mean, you couldn't ask for more with Bill Callahan. You couldn't ask for more with the waves of the program. It was maybe as
a reporter, not as a fan.
Right.
Even as a fan. I mean, think back. every week you had no idea what you were getting, right? You had these great, amazing times where you'd play a game, against Iowa State, and Callahan decided, I'm not going to run the ball, even though the winds are 55 miles an hour.
He's chucking it all over.
He's chucking it all over with Joe Daly, and you had that kind of thing. You had one of the most shocking losses I've experienced in my entire life was sitting up in the press box against Southern Miss in 2004, and I remember thinking to myself, looking around, going, they just lost to Southern Miss. I mean, what the hell happened? So you have waves like that. You got going to the Big 12 championship game in Kansas City, one of the coldest days and coldest games I've ever been around. That loss and Purify fumbling, and and then the way he left. I mean, Callahan driving by the way, in his Tahoe, driving by and looking and says, "You guys take it easy," and that was it. He was gone, and it was an incredible 4 years to be on the radio and to be around the Huskers.
Man,
Michael, I have a quick follow-up question real fast before we get too off path here. But you mentioned Albuquerque and you mentioned the hot air balloon fiesta.
Yeah.
My father-in-law is actually a hot air balloon pilot, and he participates in that fiesta every year. So did you ever ride in a hot air balloon? I'm just curious.
Oh, all the time. So I'm a helicopter guy, right? So I love to fly. Yep. And not everybody does. Not everybody loves heights. And so when they would have Balloon Fiesta would come around, one of the things you would do, one of the jobs, you could either fly in the helicopter or you could go along in one of the hot air balloons where we were videotaping. Yeah. And so I would go, and the really cool thing about Albuquerque and why this event happens there. So we have a mountain range called the Sandias, right? They're to your east. And then you have a mesa to your west. And because of that, the way the wind blows, it blows at the mountain, goes up the mountain, then comes back around. It's called the Albuquerque box. And so the balloons just essentially float through the air current. And it's why it's a great place to have Balloon Fiesta. But yeah, I've flown in mini helicopters. My wife and I, not helicopters, in mini hot air balloons. My wife and I took one actually where I thought about at the time, her girlfriend asking her to marry me at that time in the balloon. But I'd heard a story about a guy who had tried to do it. They hit a bump. He dropped the ring out of the balloon and never got it back. So I did not do that. But I loved it. Hot air balloons are the best things. And if you can go, it's the last week of September, the first week of October. I cannot sell it enough as an amazing experience. 1,000 balloons, Saturday morning, 7:00, sun's rising over the mountain, and these balloons are all ascending. It's a mass ascension. It's incredible.
I've flown into one a couple of times with my father-in-law, not at the fiesta, but you're a bigger man than I am because I was absolutely terrified the entire time.
I love
power lines. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Hard landings. We never crash in a balloon. We only have hard landings.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome.
Yeah, Albuquerque is beautiful, so I can't imagine that. And just back to your story, your rapport with Kugler, both on Twitter and in person, is just fantastic. Did you guys just click right away when you sat down with him for that?
No. The first show we did, the first hour we did was fine. Yeah. It took us a good year. Like, I almost quit once. I was like, I don't need this. It's stupid. So I have 5 sisters, essentially. Okay. So I have 3 sisters that I'm adopted by my first cousin. Okay. And she had 3 daughters. And so I was the youngest, and I grew up with these 3 sisters. I have 2 other sisters who I spent time. I lived in Pennsylvania years ago. So I've always been around women, and I have a real issue with men yelling at women. I never could deal with it. And Kevin would get really mad at our producer at the time, who was Stacy, the sports act, who now Stacy is a bigwig at NRG. She's one of the, she's bigwig. Anyway, she was our producer at the time, and he would yell at her, and I didn't handle it very well. And we started fighting. And so that first year was really rocky. It really was. Wow. But somewhere in the middle of, we actually went to a Big 12 media days. And I think it really clicked. We went to that Big 12 media days. I love interviewing athletes. Kevin is a professional and does a lot of things, but I really love interviewing athletes. And so we did that, and that really went really well. I remember we interviewed Adrian Peterson at that one, and it was awesome. And from there on, it really did click. I mean, Kevin would never tell me what he was going to talk about on the show. I knew the guests were, but he never told me the topics. And I was sleeping probably 3 hours a day at that point, because I was going to work at 2:30 in the morning.
Oh, you were still doing the morning job?
Oh yeah, I did it all the way till 2010. Wow. I actually did it with Kevin until 2012. So I left TV in 2010, worked with Kevin until 2012. I was getting up at 2:15 in the morning, going to work, working that whole shift, leaving there between 11:30 and noon, grabbing something to eat. Maybe if I had a kid at the time, I was helping with that. And then I would go to work at the radio station at about 2, or 1 when we moved it up to 2. And then I would work till 6 and then cook dinner, get home. I never slept. And so Kevin would just throw stuff at me, and whatever came off the top of my head, I would say. I didn't really. And back then, you could do that. Nowadays, in sports talk radio, you couldn't do 80% of the stuff we did back then. You couldn't do now.
Yeah. Even now, I mean, it's only 10, 15 years later, and you think it's that much different.
It's completely different. We would do things. I mean, there's so much stuff. You know, Farin Callahan. If you guys remember Farin Callahan, who was actually Matt Schick, and it started off as an idea I gave it to Matt. And Matt went into the radio booth and then came out with Farin Callahan. It was incredible. Just so much of that stuff that we did. You know, they made fun of the voice of the Huskers forever, and would make fun of the way he talked. And they made fun of the Peterson. The what was his title? Steve Peterson. So anyway, they made fun of the AD, everything. Yeah. You know, that stuff you couldn't do. We did a thing at one point called Bo at Home. It only lasted like 4 episodes, but it was you couldn't even close. Bo was so sad that he called a sex hotline, and the guy on the other end was Bill Callahan, and it went from there. I mean, it was you couldn't so much. We couldn't even make fun. Like we had a chick line. You can't even say chicks anymore. We would joke about so many inappropriate things. And people loved it. People really loved it. We did a show. It was a show called The Bowl Game to Nowhere. So when Nebraska didn't make the bowl in 2007, we decided we were going to do this live show, where Kevin would play a game versus another team that didn't make a bowl on PlayStation 1, I think. And it was Notre Dame. Notre Dame and Nebraska, both teams didn't make a bowl. And he played the whole game through. We aired it at DJ's dugout. DJ's dugout ran out of beer. They had to stop people from coming in because we were oversold. There were like 400 people there. They had to open a separate room. It was incredible. And people started arriving at noon for a show that started at 2 and watching the game on the screen. By the way, it ended with Nebraska kicking a field goal to win.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. We didn't plan it. It just happened as part of the, what they call it, I guess, automatic play on the game.
Yeah, simulated.
I mean, it was amazing moments. So many.
That's so awesome. Cool. Do you? Yeah, and I don't want to go down a political rabbit hole. I'm not. This is not on the agenda. Not on the agenda. But do you feel like I'm kind of an absolutist in let people say what they want to say, and the audience will. You know, Jerry Seinfeld is big on this. The best. Why is the word escaping me? The best censorship is your audience, right? And if you've done something that has crossed a line or strikes a nerve with an audience, they'll stop listening. So do you feel like we've lost something with all of the, scrubbing of content, and everybody's outraged all the time? I mean, the stuff you're talking about is hilarious. And I feel like it helps, especially in those rough seasons. It's a way for fans to engage and still have fun. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, let me give you the 3 rules of radio. Okay. Here's your 3 rules of radio. The first rule is the mic's always hot.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Don't say something you don't want heard because it's always hot. One of the other ones is you can say anything you want once, anything you want one time. And the third one is yes, you have to cater everything you do to your audience, what they like, what they don't like, who's listening. You've got to give them everything they want. That's how you have an entertaining show. I will say, even though there are some things I regret that we can't do anymore on the radio, there's also things I regret doing. Okay. I was incredibly insensitive at points of my life about mental health. Even though my wife is a therapist, I was incredibly insensitive about it. I really blew it off in terms of people and the way they had to adjust to their own mental health. And I now later, as a 54-year-old, I understand it much better. So there are things I did that we did on the air that I am a little bit embarrassed about because of the way we handled it. I would say that's about 10% of the stuff we did. The other 90% was, I think, great humor. I think it was healthy for the fan base and for our radio group and our radio show. But yeah, I hate the fact that someone can be canceled for a mistake. That drives me nuts. You cannot be canceled for a mistake. Now, if you intentionally do something to harm somebody or to hurt somebody, then I have no problem with that person receiving some sort of punishment. If it's censorship, it's censorship. I don't believe, though, that if you make an honest mistake, I'm going to give you an example of an honest mistake. I was in Monroe. I was a first year weekend sports fill-in anchor. I wasn't even the full-time guy. And I was doing a story about the Negro League and who was getting in from the Negro League. Okay. And one of the guys was a local guy from nearby Monroe. And so I had to mention him. And I said the N word instead of the correct Negro League. It came out. I was talking too fast. I was a little nervous because I was doing one of my first sportscasts. And we got some calls and people complained about it. Even though I'm African-American, people were still very mad about it. It was a mistake, though. I mean, it literally wasn't anything I thought about. So you make a mistake, you should, maybe someone says, hey, don't do it again, or be careful, or whatever else. But you certainly shouldn't receive any kind of censorship or be pushed out of your job because you make a mistake. There are people now on the radio and in media that do things on purpose for a number of different reasons that hurt people. And I don't want to see, I don't like seeing that happen at all. Not in this business.
That's incredible insight. Thank you for sharing that.
Mike'l, I don't know if I'm going to get a much better segue than you talking about that and maybe people being offended or not. And you brought up Matt Schick a couple of times. So I have to ask, I have buddies that would absolutely kill me if I didn't ask you this. And maybe it's about a year or so too late, but what do you think of Nick Baugh's impression of you on the Schick and Nick podcast, and how often do people recite not their impression of you, but their impression of Nick doing his impression of you?
Yeah, it happens quite a bit on Twitter, especially if I post anything about me being in a car, because it's always an Equinox.
Yeah, it's got bucket seats. Yeah,
and I used to. So every Friday, at 4:00, we would have on Elk and Wagamon. And the first question here's another example of something I regret a little bit because of the way I handled it. But
I know where you're going.
I would always ask him when we start talking about the movie. I'm like, well, is so-and-so naked in the movie? I want to know if she's naked. What's the naked stuff in there? And so that's why he added my commercial from Huber.com and the Equinox. By the way, I bought an Equinox from Huber.com with bucket seats that I had for a long time. It was a great vehicle. I got a really good deal. But yeah, that happens a lot. And Nick's always been amazing with his impersonations. Nick started on the radio with us.
Yep.
When Nick was redshirting that one year, Kevin went to him and said, "Hey, would you like to do like a Creighton basketball report for us?" It was called the report, report, right? And so he would come on every week, and you could tell right away that he was good at this, and he was always very funny. And so people can make fun of me all. I talk really fast. I always have. I have some, catchphrases that I use and certain things I fall back on. And so, no, I've never had a problem with that. I love Nick. Seriously. I remember when Nick got sick, and I remember thinking to myself, I got mad, right? Because there's so many bad people in this world who live to be old.
Yeah.
And Nick, who never did anything wrong to anybody, who was one of the nicest people I ever met and one of the best people I ever met, was, suffering through something that could take his life. I remember being so angry with the world about that for a little while because of that. I love Nick. Nick and Schick do a great job. I was always a big fan of their show originally, 12 years ago. And somehow all these years later, they have a podcast now on a radio show that lasted about 2.5 years or 3 years.
Yeah.
That's very successful. So no, I love those guys.
Yeah. I didn't think you'd have any hard feelings about it, because knowing those guys just from listening to them, I don't think they would do anything that would offend anybody without them kind of being in on the joke. So
yeah, the joke is now that, a 25, 30-year career is all summed up by one, is somebody naked inside of an Equinox with buckets. Right.
So, Mike'l, you've done so many different things. We've just talked about a lot of them. One of your current jobs is as the executive director of the Jet Award Foundation. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, can you just share with our fellow Common fans, what is the Jet Award?
Okay, so the Jet Award Foundation does two things. The first thing it does is we award the best return specialist every year in college football. The best kickoff and punt return person. We have a voting committee. We get together. I kind of put together a little list. I've been helping out since 2011 when it started, kind of putting together the media group. We were all volunteer for the first 12 years. I'm the first actual full-time employee of the Jet Award Foundation. And so we do that. So the first thing we do is we pick that athlete every year. This is the best kickoff punt returner in the country. We also pick a legacy award winner every year. So obviously there was somebody in 1969 who was the best returner, right? Well, he didn't get an award because our award wasn't around. So we pick that person to be our legacy award winner, and we give them an award as well. The other side of the Jet Award Foundation is we raise money for scholarships for kids to go to Metro Community College to major in the trades. Johnny Rogers graduated from Tech High. Tech High was the technical school, obviously by the name, in the state of Nebraska and in Omaha. And so he believes in the trades. Even when I first met Johnny, God, I don't know, good 20 years ago, he was always talking about how we need to have more students in the trades. You know, 4-year college isn't for everybody. You know, college for everybody was one of the worst decisions we ever made as a country, trying to send people to college who didn't want to be there or couldn't be there. And now they have a whole bunch of debt. But what we try to do is we pay tuition, books, and fees for students who are majoring in the trades. The trades cover everything from accounting to nursing to IT to the things you think about, like construction, welding. And so you can go to school for the 2 years it takes to get your associate's degree, or however long it takes to get your certificate, and we foot the bill. So we've been raising money for that since 2018. We have about 100 that have graduated. Currently, we have over 160 that have the scholarship and are at Metro going through their classes. The only reason I left the job I was doing before this, which I loved, I was working at the City Pavilion. It was a government job. Insurance was incredible. The only reason I left there was because I had been working with this for a long time. I have a commitment to education ever since I started working in Albuquerque as an education reporter and saw the struggles that people have with education. And so that's the only reason I took the job. It's a 3-year job, essentially. It's a grant funded job. And I have 3 years to get this whole thing where it needs to be, where it's self-sufficient, where we have an endowment going. So it continues long after Johnny, long after me, long after everybody. So that's my goal right now.
That's so cool. And it's so important for people to have that, to get that first rung on the economic ladder. And like you said, not everyone college is not the right choice for everyone. And so, I mean, that work is really impactful and super cool. Is there a way that, so the gala the main fundraising vehicle? And is there a way for folks to engage otherwise or support the foundation otherwise?
Yeah, we have a gala every year. April 4th coming up this next year. Our guest speaker is going to be Danny Woodhead. Enjoy listening to Danny. We got Danny doing it. Our legacy award winner is actually a former Nebraska player. DeJon Gomes is not Gomes.
Oh,
that's
sweet.
That's not wrong. I completely blew that. It's Gross. DeJuan Gross. So back in 2000 and 2001 and 2002, he was one of the best punt and kick returners in the country. And so we never reached out to him about doing it. And I was talking to Coach Rhule, who helped pick us the legacy award, longtime football coach over at Omaha Central. And he's like, no, I didn't even think about it. We went through his numbers. We're like, he's deserving. So DeJuan Gross will be on as our legacy award winner. And of course, our winner will be whoever wins it and whoever does the best so far. Right now, the leading candidate is actually a returner from Houston, who's got a couple kickoff returns under his belt for touchdowns. But you can also go to our website, jetaward.com. And at the website, we have a donation page there. You can buy a table at the gala. And one of the best ways to do it is to just, we want to encourage, if you know somebody, a kid who loves the trades or somebody who wants to be in the trades, that we have scholarships available. So that's the best thing you could do is tell them about it, let them apply for it. Our application is really simple. I mean, it takes about 3 minutes to do, as long as you are over 2.0 from high school, as long as you have some financial need, we're going to give you a scholarship for this. And so that's one of the best things you can do. If you know a kid that wants to be in the trades, then let's get them over to Metro and get them a degree.
So, Michael, on that website, you said there's a link to click to donate. So if people are looking for it towards the end of the year, tax deduction for donations, they can just go on the website and donate from there.
Yeah, let me give you. So we changed one of the things that I was tasked to do when I took this job was to get our website fixed up because it was kind of old, had been hacked a couple of times. And so we have a brand new one that's getting ready to drop. It'll probably drop. We're taping this on Friday. It'll drop Monday or Tuesday of next week. And so, but even the old one has a donation bar at the bottom of the first page. It's really easy to use. It takes you to a site where you can donate with your credit card. It's the way the majority of people who give us, whether it's $5 or $25, it's the main way they do that. And so having that donation page is very valuable.
Awesome.
That's super cool. And I would like to ask you, Michael, I know you weren't there. You know, it's like in The Godfather when Michael says somebody has to answer for Santino. Somebody has to answer for DeMornay Pearsonell in 2014. How did he not get the award in 2014?
Okay, so he was a semifinalist in 2014. He was a semifinalist. But I think if you look back, I'm pretty sure we gave the award that year to Lockett from
I think it was Lockett. I think it was Lockett.
Yeah. And I think if you look at his numbers,
yeah,
they were a little bit better. I will tell you that at that time, we had a voting panel. And so I gave him 3 finalists. We had Charles Davis was a part of that. All kinds of media from across the country were a part of it. I had 12 people, some located in the Big 10 countries, some located in the Big 12 country. And they're the ones that voted for him to be the winner. That's what happened. DeMornay Pearsonell was supposed to be on Let It Fly with us yesterday and stood us up. And stood us up because his wife, who works at a hospital, had to go to work, and so he had to go take care of his little girls. So we're eventually going to catch up with him. But the last time Nebraska returned, I'm saying this on a Friday before Nebraska returns a kickoff for a touchdown tomorrow against Northwestern. But the last time a kickoff return for a touchdown happened was in, you guys know?
I was going to J.D. Spielman in 2017.
2017 against Arkansas State.
Yep.
Yeah.
Arkansas State. Yep.
Maybe.
What about punt?
But it wasn't it.
Hold on. What was the last punt return DPE? Because I don't remember the last punt return.
No, the last kickoff return was DeMornay Pearsonell in 17 against Arkansas State, wasn't it?
I thought that was Spielman
for kickoff return, because Spielman did have 2. He had 2 punt returns, right?
Why don't we go ahead and
look it up
really
we
quick.
Can go look it up. But I have the thing. I keep a separate draft for all of the kickoff and punt returns. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, because that's what we do, right? And so I thought that I had that as the last. That's my key. One of my keys to the game is
for Northwestern. You're predicting it.
Yeah, because Northwestern has the lowest touchback percentage in the Big Ten. Okay. Only 7 touchbacks so far. Pearsonell, 99 yards versus Arkansas State in 2017, right?
I'm almost sure that was Spielman, but
that was Spielman. Okay, my fault. I don't know why I wrote
the
down.
Internet is saying Spielman.
Spielman. Okay, I'm sure you're right about that. Yeah. So that's the last one until it happens tomorrow.
That was
I love that.
We won that game, but that was the one where it's like, oh, this does not look better.
It was throw into the end zone. They had to throw in the end zone late, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first, that was like Diaco's here. He's going to make our defense great. And then it was like,
I hated that whole season because one thing, I've known Tanner Lee since he was back at Jesuit High School in New Orleans. And he was a turnover machine back then. And when they brought him in, I kept telling people, I said, Tanner Lee has never been a 60% passer going back to 8th grade. So I don't think Tanner Lee's going to be very good. And everybody's like, he's a better talent, whatever. I knew him at Jesuit High School. I knew him at Tulane. He was the same guy at Nebraska. This wasn't going to work.
You were way out in front on that.
I knew the Tanner Lee one.
Geoff, I know Geoff may have to leave a little early. Geoff, do you have any? I want to make sure you get any questions you might have before you have to slip out on us.
Yeah, I'm going to dip out probably in the next 5 minutes. But I mean, if I was thinking questions here, I mean, you see Johnny quite frequently, don't you? You get there walking
almost every day. Yeah.
Is he constantly just doing the Heisman pose in his office? Or what's that like?
Wouldn't you, Jeff?
Here's the funniest part about it. Jeff. The funniest part about it is every time he takes a picture with somebody, after the first regular picture, then they do the pose, right? Sure. And it doesn't matter who it is. None of them ever put the right leg up or have the right arm out. They never do it correctly. And so he's always got to correct them. He'll pull his leg up, put this arm out every single time, even though Johnny has been doing it every day for, 50 years.
Right.
So yeah, that is something that Johnny does a lot of, but he loves it. I've never met somebody that loves meeting and talking with people as much as Johnny Rodgers. He just, it's in his DNA. He just loves to do it. It doesn't matter where he is, who he's with. You can bring Johnny with you and he will make a conversation with whoever's there. It's incredible.
Does he want to come on the Common Fan podcast?
I can certainly ask him. I set up a lot of his calendar. I might be able to help him do that. Anything to help promote the Jet Award, I'm sure Johnny will be for.
We would love to promote the Jet Award. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Any boys, anything else on the Jet Award? We got a couple of things. Michael, if you have time, we'd love to ask you about a couple other things. Yep, you got anything else on Johnny or the Jet Award or anything, gents?
No.
Okay.
Oh, very informative.
if it was me, Michael, I'd have a hard time doing your job because I would just ask Johnny every day to tell me about the punt return against Oklahoma, and I would have a hard time focusing on anything
Have you
else.
have you ever watched Johnny do the breakdown of it? So he does this
No.
breakdown where he goes through every block. There were essentially 9 blocks on it. So almost everybody on the return team had something to do with the return. And he does this thing where he stops the video and shows you this block, and then here's another block, and it's a really cool breakdown that he does. He does it usually when he goes to an event and they have video there. He'll do that whole breakdown for you. It's pretty cool.
That is super cool. I gotta find that somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, switching gears a little bit. So, Michael, you've got I guess it's almost a year old now, a relatively new podcast, though, called the Let It Fly Show. Can you tell us about that?
It started off because the Let It Fly Sports Bar was going to be built in the Capital District. And so Mike Miller started the Let It Fly brand way back when he was at Miami. Mike Miller, former NBA player, 2-time world champion with the Heat. He started it back then. He's a native of Mitchell, South Dakota.
Yep.
The closest place to that is Sioux Falls. And so, or closest place with people is Sioux Falls. And so he opened a sports bar there. He had first started a energy drink called Let It Fly. And then he started a agent company. He's an agent. And then he opened the bar. And so he opened the first one in Sioux Falls. And then since he had played in Memphis so long, he started one in Germantown, which is a suburb of Memphis. And then since his brother Ryan is an assistant coach for Creighton and his son Mason plays on the team, he thought, you know what, Omaha might be a great place. They come here, they get enough investors, and they're going to open this sports bar. And so they said, you know what, we'd love to have a podcast studio inside of it. We need a podcast to go along with it. And so Ryan Miller, who's assistant coach, came to me, and I wasn't looking to do a podcast. Again, I'm never looking to do anything. Stuff just comes. And I said, here are the people you should talk to. And I gave him all these different names, whether they are Creighton-based people like Ravi Lula or Nick Baugh or John Bishop. I gave him those people. I said, if you want to have more of a Nebraska fade, here are the people you can contact that do a great job doing the show. Here are some people that would be good to be a sidekick as well. So I gave him all these lists of stuff. We had a little meeting. He calls me back about a month later and he says, okay, I'm narrowing the list down, but I want you to host it. And I'm like, well, first of all, it's called Let It Fly. You're a Creighton assistant coach. I have spent the majority of my career in Omaha talking about my dislike for Creighton and the Blue Jays as a guy who grew up a Christian Brother high school kid who hated the Jesuits because they were Jesuit and we were De La Salle and we hated each other. So I grew up being trained not to like the Jesuits or Jesuit schools. And so he's like, I'm like, are you sure you want me to do this? And he said, everybody says that you should do it. So fine. I need somebody to do it with. And so to balance it out, Josh Jones, who played for Creighton and played for Omaha Central and won 3 state championships there, was the person they picked. And Josh was kind of raw. And so we've been throughout this time kind of working with him on airwise and some of the stuff he's doing, but he brings a lot of energy. I don't know if anybody has as much energy as Josh Jones does. And so we cover, everything in sports. Right now it's primarily football, and we're trying to do a lot of football guests and have them on. And then come December, we'll be in Vegas for when Creighton's there playing. Following them there, and we'll do a couple shows from there. And then, when basketball season gets going, we'll do a whole lot of basketball and have a lot of Creighton players on, and we'll have Coach Mack on next week actually to talk about Creighton. So we do a little bit of everything. It's yesterday our show actually had on the head coach of Union Omaha, the new head coach of Union Omaha. They're playing in the playoffs right now for the USL 1. They will be playing against whoever wins on Saturday after this is recorded. Will then play Union Omaha. They do the best thing in the world. Mike'l Severe for reseeding playoffs, right? Always, if you don't reseed playoffs, you're not doing it right. And they reseed the playoffs. So they don't know who they're going to play yet, but it's a chance for Union Omaha to win another title. So it'd be awesome if that happens. And we had him on yesterday. So we did a little bit of everything with Little Fly.
That's super cool. And I know you've had, some current players on recently. I saw you had Crouch on, I think in August, kind of before the first game. Mm-hmm. Did he do the Heisman pose?
He does not do the Heisman pose. That's not part of Eric's thing. He did, however, before the season, go down and work with Jeff Sims when they were trying to work the option. And Nebraska had no plans. Matt Rhule and Satterfield had no plans to run the option as much as they have. None whatsoever. But luckily, by chance, Eric went down there and they asked him to work with the quarterbacks a little bit on their pitches and things like that. So it's funny, even though Heinrich Harburg had run some of that in his past when he was in high school, he got a refresher from Eric Crouch before the season ever started. So once he started running that, Now Eric pitched the ball as much as Heinrich Harburg does. Eric was known for keeping the ball occasionally. So maybe that's why Harburg is not giving it up. I don't know. But yeah, we had Eric on. We had Thomas Fedoni on last week. Thomas Fedoni, who, by the way, is an amateur tattoo artist. I don't know if anybody knows this.
No kidding.
A bunch of the teammates have had him do tattoos for them. He basically just thought, what is this kind of cool idea? He bought the gear himself and started practicing and got really good at it. He showed me some of his work. It's incredible. So Thomas Fedoni, we had him on, and we had on Gabe Ervin after he got injured. And Gabe was an incredible interview. So positive of a person, despite the fact that he was going to lose another season to a major injury. But those were the two current guys we had on.
That's really impressive about Irvin. And fellow Common fans, if you need a tattoo, make sure to look up Mr. Fedoni.
No, he does not have his license yet.
Oh, okay.
Hang on, TJ. Let's not get the kid in trouble here.
You have to have a license, but he just right now is doing it for fun, that kind of thing. But eventually, I think that's what he wants. After his NFL career is over with, he'll be a tattoo artist.
Well, that's gentlemen. Cool. I am going to have to respectfully hop off the call. I have another meeting. So, Michael, I just want to say thank you so much. I mean, with us trying to get this off the ground, this is a huge, huge help, and this totally gives us a ton of credibility as a podcast. So, again, I just want to reiterate, thank you so much for being on. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. I can't wait to listen to the last of it.
Geoff, I give you a tongue as you leave.
Thank you.
Geoff, just know, Geoff, we're gonna talk about you, and it's not gonna be nice.
Yeah,
whatever. I'm used to it now. So, all right, take care, fellas.
See you, Geoff.
As a reminder, we're all fellow Common fans, and we all have day jobs. So Geoff actually has to go do his day job. So that's a good transition, though. That's a cool story about Crouch going down to Lincoln and working with the quarterbacks. We did want to get your thoughts on the current team. Michael, I don't know if you remember, I used to pepper you with emails when you were at the bottom line. I've always loved listening to you, and two things I love about your Husker coverage. And actually, I don't know if you know this, our most recent episode that's out is called Feed the Addiction. And part of our guiding principles as a Common Fan podcast is we're here to help you fan. And so we want to help, we want to lift up all the sources that are out there to help, Husker fans with their unhealthy obsession with Nebraska football. And so we referenced you as one of our favorites actually on the Feed the Addiction episode. So FYI. But what the point I made then was, one, you're a football guy. It's clear you know your football and you love your football. And then two, I like your perspective knowing that you're not from Nebraska. And I'm not suggesting that others who cover the team are homers, but I do think you are probably you're always one of the most objective guys covering the Huskers. And actually, we talked about the 2017 team earlier, and I think whatever metrics you look at, you predicted like 4-8 or something that was pretty 3-9 or 4 or 5 wins, something like that. You were pretty close. And I remember we were all hyped up on Tanner Lee. We thought Bob Diaco was going to, we were everybody in Husker Nation, as always, was drinking the Kool-Aid. And I remember playing some golf with some guys, before that opening weekend, I think against Arkansas State. And being like, I don't know. I talking about your predictions. I think it's going to be better than that. And sure enough, you were spot on. So always just love your objectivity. So with that in mind, the Huskers are 3-3. Common fans, this will probably be out after the Northwestern game, but we're recording the day before the Northwestern game. Kind of your thoughts. I guess we can start on this. Thoughts on Matt Rhule. Early thoughts on Matt Rhule.
Yeah, Matt. So I did follow Matt Rhule pretty closely after his first year at Temple, because also a side thing that I do is I like to gamble. And you always try to find those coaches that fit what you're looking for as a gambler. And I'm an analytics guy. I have formulas that I believe in, things you need to do as a coach and as a team in order to show to me that I should be betting on you or against you. And so Matt Rhule was one of those guys, and you knew it right away the first year. As bad as Temple was, you saw some of the potential for the covering. You saw some of the things he did, right? Very good special teams, not turning the ball over a ton, being good in the red zone. Those were all things that happened at Temple pretty quickly. And by the last year he was there, they were one of the tops in turnover rate. They were one of the tops in red zone rate. I love finishing drive rate, one of my favorite stats. You cross the opponent's 40, how many points did you get? Are you getting 3? Are you getting 7? Are you getting none? Nebraska this year, by the way, 24 times over the 50-yard line, only 9 scores. If you go over the 50, you should score at least 50% of the time. Actually, in the NFL, it's 54.7 this year currently. I know that because the Saints are 38%. They're horrible at it. But anyway, so I'm big on finishing drive rate. And Matt Rhule does those things. And so when he got to Baylor, I kept my eye on him through the first year and said, okay, is the same kind of thing going to happen where he starts off slowly and then all of a sudden he's getting a bunch of ATS wins? And it did. Same thing happened. So I followed him a lot at Baylor. The Carolina thing, I'm a Saints fan, obviously, NFC South twice. I saw him coach there. It is such a different world between what happens in the NFL. As a young man working in New Orleans as a producer and an intern, I covered the Saints a lot. And then it was Jim Mora as the head coach. And it's just a mess there sometimes. Obviously, you have the players who are making a bunch of money, who you have to deal with their egos. You have an owner who at sometimes you have to deal with their egos. You have a general manager that sometimes the head coach gets along with the general manager. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're the same person, which is horrible in my opinion. You're never going to be successful that way. And I think they may have given Matt Rhule a little bit too much power. And he tried to build it like he built Temple and Baylor. And in the NFL, you just don't have that clock. That clock doesn't exist in the NFL. You cannot build that way. And the Carolina fans got pretty disenfranchised with him in the second year because there were some things that happened in terms of play calling. And I think by the time it got to the third year, and he still didn't have a quarterback at that point because there's so many injuries with Cam Newton and everybody, at that point, they were just done with him when the season started. And so I think he never really had a chance there. I think Tepper could have done a better job as an owner too, helping him out, but he didn't. Anyway, speaking of that, now here at Nebraska, I've had the chance to sit down and interview him a few times. I've had a chance to just talk to him. I believe in him. I think he's honest. I think he cares about what he's doing. I think more than anything else, he's got a big amount of pride. If you guys are Pulp Fiction fans, Marcellus Wallace talked about pride. You have that pride in you. He has that. And so he doesn't want to fail again. And he's going to do everything he can. And everyone around him is going to have to do everything they can so he doesn't fail again. And so that's why I think, and I will go back and admit, I thought Scott Frost, when he got hired, was a great hire, and I thought it would work. I really did. But I honestly believe, and there are different guys in a whole bunch of ways, but I think Matt Rhule is the perfect person for Nebraska right now. I think you have to give him time. You've got to understand that they're not going to be able to win at the level you want them to win right away. You also got to remember that what happens next year in the Big Ten is going to be incredible. You bring in USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington on top of Penn State and Ohio State and Michigan. I mean, dude, you finish in the top 8. You're doing pretty well. It's good.
No kidding.
So you got to give him time, but I think he's going to get it done. He's got to find a quarterback. Obviously, he's got to get everything fixed up in terms of who he brings in the portal and how they fill that out. They got to figure out their NIL and who they want to pay and who they want to pay. But I think he gets it done.
Nice.
Michael, and don't you think, like, for me, I loved the way Coach Rhule reacted to the beatdown from Michigan and then having them out the next day. And it sounds like that might have been one of their best practices, if not their best practice of the year. And just with the kind of the behind the scenes, they've got that little YouTube video series going with the GBR Rewind or whatever they call it. Yeah. And kind of seeing behind the scenes on how he's kind of motivating these guys. Because I feel like, we talked about mental health earlier, and whether you want to believe any of that or not in terms of what's going on in that locker room, sometimes I think these let's face it, they're kids. They need somebody to build them up and kind of get some sort of belief that, they're good enough. They're good enough. They just got to get right mentally and kind of get over that hump. And for me, I'm kind of been the guy that says, we've needed kind of more of a motivator type here for quite a while. So I'm all in on it, and it sounds like you might be too. I really hope it works out.
Yeah. It's, I really believe in whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I believe in that. It's cliche as you want to say it. I don't know, Matthew or TJ, if you ever got your ass kicked, but usually after you get your ass kicked, after you recover from it, you're better off. And I can give you 3 or 4 different examples. Nebraska in the end of 1968 got their ass kicked. Kansas State, Oklahoma. And you know what happened? Bobby Vandy went, I got to change some stuff. And he hired this guy named Tom Osborne as his offensive coordinator and elevated Monty Kiffin to his defensive coordinator. And they went on from there. Here's a great example. Michigan State takes on a 1995 Nebraska team. And Nick Saban's a pretty good coach now, and they got their asses kicked. And after the game, he's standing in the middle of the field, and Tom Osborne, as he always is, understated and says, don't worry, I think we're pretty good. And they were, and that motivated Nick Saban to know where he needed to be. Nebraska found their water level against Michigan State. Here's where you are in the pool. It's over your head at this point. So now you know where you need to get to be able to swim. And I believe that was a good thing for them. Whether the Sunday practice happened or not, I think it was good just to know where you are. Now you look ahead and you say, what do we have to do better? How do we get to that? How do we get to where Michigan is right now? Well, obviously, it's stealing signals. But other than that, you got to get to where Michigan is. And so that gives you that level. And now you know where to go. And I think it was a healthy thing to get beat down the way they did. And whatever people think about how hard Nebraska played, or if they didn't play hard enough, they weren't ready for the game. They went against a team that was so motivated to kick their ass because they heard all week, the number one ranked Power 5 run defense is? It's Nebraska. You know how great the black shirts are? They're back. They're this. Man, Harbaugh said, really? Oh, really? Okay. So we're better at every single position than you are, and you're talking about, and he came in there and he did what he did. And could have made it worse. He played 4 damn quarterbacks. He traveled 4 quarterbacks on the road. Nobody travels 4 quarterbacks on the road. And he brought all 4.
JJ McCarthy's kissing his girlfriend on the sideline by like the second quarter.
Exactly. So he could have made it much worse. But I think that helped Nebraska. It was a good thing for them to get that done in this first year. And now just get better from it. That's all.
Yeah, we talked about that. We also we had a 2-part midseason review, and we talked about how we felt like the Illinois sort of the response to the Michigan game, the win against Illinois was kind of a turning point. Again, fellow Common fans, we're recording this on the day before the Northwestern game, but all 3 of us, Matt, Jeff, and I, have predicted the Huskers to win the next 3 and also to beat Iowa. So maybe a little bit of Kool-Aid drinking going on there, but we, at the very least, we do believe there's 3 wins left on the schedule. Sure. I don't care if it's the Vandalay Industries Bowl on, at 10 a.m. on December 14th. We are dancing, consistent theme on this podcast. We get to a bowl game this year. We're dancing in the streets. We're taking the kids out of school. We're acting like, we're treating it like a national championship. Do you think there's at least 3 wins left on the schedule?
Oh, certainly. Now, to say they're going to win 4 in a row when this team has not won 3 in a row since 2016 is, it's something. But I certainly believe that they beat Northwestern. I picked 27-14 on Big Red Wrap Up. So I believe they will. I watched the Penn State game, I watched the Minnesota game, and I watched the game they played against the Howard Bison, the HBCU. They almost gave the game away too. So I watched them enough to know what they are. They're 2 different teams depending on who's playing a quarterback for them. If it's Ben Bryant, they're a better passing team. If it's Sullivan, they're a better quarterback-driven run team. So I think I know what they are. I think Nebraska's better across the board and can wear them down and beat them. So I think so for sure. Looking ahead, though, I don't know what to get out of Purdue sometimes. They're 2 different teams on any given weekend, whoever you're watching. And so it depends on which Purdue team shows up. I know Michigan State's a mess right now. I think Michigan State, as we're obviously taping this tomorrow, they will play against Michigan. I'm assuming they're going to get a beat down from that. I don't know. Because that was occasionally whenever Michigan State has been a 2-touchdown or more underdog against Michigan, I think over the last 20 years, they've actually covered.
They always cover. Yeah.
You never know. But anyway, how Michigan State will be by that point, I really don't know. And Maryland's another team that has gotten the last 3 years, started off really fast and tailed off at the end. When it gets to the point where they're playing conference games and they're playing where they get out coached sometimes, because even though their coach is a great recruiter, I don't think he's an overall great X's and O's coach. Anyway, I don't know what happens from here, but I think there's three wins for sure. And Nebraska goes to a bowl game. I hope it's not Music City again, only because that wasn't that long ago, and that was a long time ago. Anyway, no matter what it is, it doesn't matter to me. Whatever it is, they can go to and they'll be fine. But yeah, I think there's 3 more. I think there's 4 more actually.
Awesome.
So Michael, let's go back. I think you said 27-14 for Northwestern game. So you've got Nebraska covering just barely.
It's funny because at the time when I made the pick, which is on a Monday, it was 13.5.
Yeah.
So it was right at the line. I seen it go all the way to 11, sitting at is it 12 right now?
11.5, 12, depending on where you look.
11.5, 12. Yeah. So yeah, I do. I think so. I think the game could literally be 17-6 based off of what I've seen from Northwestern's offense at times. And then at the same time, 23-20, a game against Northwestern in Memorial Stadium, where have we not seen that before, right? So anything can happen. I play the numbers, and based off what Nebraska has done leading up to that game and the way they played, if they can avoid the big turnovers, like we say every week, I think they can get to 27. I don't think that Northwestern with that offense can get over 20. that's kind of my.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a good prediction. And we'll see if you're since this is probably going to come out early next week, we'll see if you were correct on that or not.
Kickoff return touchdown too. Don't forget
Yeah.
about that.
Oh yeah, we would love that. Tommy Hill. Phone's ringing.
Now,
Tommy Hill.
I don't know if it's Tommy. There's never been a player. I can say this honestly. I've been here since 2002, and I've been watching college football since 1975. There's never been a player in college football history that has done less, that is loved more by his head coach than Tommy Hill. What is it? I mean, all he's done is like get beat on a look back, double zero blitz, fumble a kickoff, get a PI called on him.
I mean, he's got to be doing some incredible things once in a while in practice, right? That's got to be the explanation.
Greatest practice player.
He had a step or two on the Minnesota defensive back. If Jeff Sims just puts the ball on him in the third quarter, that's probably a different game.
Yeah, he was open in that time.
I'm not saying
they love that dude, man. They love him. Maybe it'll be him on the kickoff return. Maybe it'll be one of those where they kick it off and it's like squibbed and some up back picks it up and runs it back for touchdown. You never know.
Yeah, I want to be mindful of your time, Michael. But if you have time, I'd love to ask you really quick. You talked about Crouch working with the quarterbacks. We've heard stories about Ron Brown kind of teaching these guys some old school option concepts. And I think that, Rhule has made comments about, he's saying he's the head coach. Obviously, he's focused on running the ball and stopping the run. But I think he made a comment recently about how Satterfield would love to throw it up and score 45 points a game. And also clearly, like, they've had so many injuries and they're just trying to figure out what they can do with what they have. What do you think they want this offense to be long term? So 2-3 years from now, they've got depth and they've got the players they want to have. What are they doing?
I still think they are a 59-41 run the pass. I think he's always going to be that way because of where he's located. I think he knows that in the state he can get offensive linemen. He knows that he can find running backs, whether it's the portal or through recruiting. I think he knows he can do that. So I think it'll always be a run-first offense. I think what they want to have is they want to have a quarterback who can run but isn't designing running. I think they're looking to have a guy. So like Danny Kaline, what he is right now, I think that's a good – I don't know if Danny's the guy, but I think he's the target of what you're looking for. Daniel Kaline can get you 2 yards from the 2-yard line, running in the end zone on a scramble. He can pick you up a first down if it's 3rd and 6 and he's got to run for 7 yards. You're not going to design run plays for him. I think that's the quarterback he's looking for to have down the road. But right now he's doing exactly what we asked Bill Callahan to do in 2004. Stop trying to take a round peg and put it in a square hole, or the opposite way. He is taking what he has. We always use the analogy, right? He's in the kitchen. He's got all these different things in the kitchen. He's lost a few of his recipes. He's lost a few of his ingredients, but he's still going to make some soup. And that's what he's been doing the best he can. And I admire that. I do like the idea that he kind of steps on, as he says, his coordinators and says, this is what we're doing now. But I think eventually when we get to the point where he has more of those ingredients, he's going to let them do what they want to do. He's going to let them have more freedom. But right now he's got to win games. And the only way to win games right now is to reduce possessions, avoid turnovers, and get that defense on the field to make stops.
Yep. Makes sense. Awesome stuff, Michael. Thank you so much. I have one final question.
Yeah, no problem.
You're a Star Wars guy, right?
I am a Star Wars guy. Yeah. My whole family is.
Could you please rank the following from favorite to least favorite?
Oh my goodness.
Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Andor, and Ahsoka. So basically the streaming shows, nothing involving the movies and nothing animated.
So I've only seen 2 episodes. We haven't watched the 3rd episode of Ahsoka yet. We're trying to watch as a family. My oldest has a job, so he's gone in the evening. So we're going to watch that tomorrow.
I'm actually currently working my way through Ahsoka as well. Yeah.
Okay. So I so far, the first 2 episodes have been incredible. I love them. I'd say number 1 out of all of those would be Andor. Andor was essentially a movie, right? It was essentially a Star Wars movie made into 6 parts or whatever, how long it was. So Andor first, then probably the beginning of The Mandalorian and the way it was when it started, that first season of The Mandalorian. I probably would put that second. Boba had so many problems, and it wasn't what it should have been, right? Like, he literally didn't have to talk. You could have just made Boba Fett who he was from the movies and the animated series and everything else, and done it that way and made it better. So it's last for me.
My favorite Boba Fett episodes were when they brought the Mandalorian back.
Exactly.
Right. Right. 100%.
Yeah. Although what Boba did for fans like I am of the animated series is it brought you real life animated, right? You got these people who you watched in Rebels and who you watched in Clone Wars, and it gave you them in real life, which was really cool.
Like that is cool.
I love that.
The blue guy with
Cad Bane.
Cad
Bane. Having Cad Bane in there. Now, supposedly killing Cad Bane, that wasn't a great decision at all, in my opinion. But anyway,
nobody's ever dead.
Well, I agree with that. I grew up watching soap operas. Nobody's ever dead. I'm missing one, right? What
Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan would fit right in there. I thought Obi-Wan had moments where I think Obi-Wan and the way they did Vader was something we all needed. People might I'm 54 years old. I needed that. I really needed that kind of closure, even though it's not closure, but I needed to know that happened, right? That's good for me. I never believed that they went from a fight that created Vader to all of a sudden not seeing each other and ever meeting again all the way in the future. I mean, at least 19 years later, I never believed that. It didn't make sense. It's a big galaxy, but it's not a big galaxy. So I love that part of it, bringing Vader in there and having them fight and doing that. Same thing about the animated series when you had the episode in Rebels where Ahsoka got a chance to meet Anakin as well in the Vader costume. So all of that is made, it fills in all these little gaps of my life.
And you can tell they're intentionally trying to address some of those holes. You know, and I think Matt and I are both in our early 40s. So we, like you, we grew up with the originals, and that's all we had for a long time. And so I've been interested to discover that sort of the generation that's younger than us actually prefers the prequels, which I'm not a huge fan of. Yeah. And I felt like, so I wasn't sure how I would feel about the Obi-Wan show. And I felt, to your point, I felt like I loved it. I think Matt did it too. It felt like it really bridged the gap. It answered some questions. Even like it never made sense to me in the original when Obi-Wan said only a master of evil, Darth, and he called him Darth. And then they addressed it. They fixed that in Obi-Wan. And there were several little things in Obi-Wan that they did to fix that. So
go ahead.
Sorry, the thing that I liked and actually made me tear up was in the Obi-Wan series when he tells little Leia that if she ever needs help, then he'll be there to help her. And I, as a father and as a Star Wars nut, I was like waterworks, like just a mess watching that. I'm like, he really does mean it. He's going to be back to help someday.
You served my father in the Clone. Only problem with it is that when she made the recording, instead of saying you served my father in the Clone Wars, maybe she says, remember the time you saved my life? Remember that time?
Yeah.
Come help me again. Right. Yeah, that would be great. But there's so many things so there was a whole bunch of books that Kugler actually introduced me to that are not canon anymore, but they have taken little things like that and put it in some of these stories. And then you have all of those books about all these different players that were kind of on the outside. And they've taken parts of that. Like, so when you're watching Obi-Wan and you know they're inside that tunnel where you had a lot of rebels who were hiding, and there's these names up on the wall. Most of those names are taken from people that were in novels or in other comic books. And so it was like a little side for people who had read those. It gives you hey, look at that name. I remember that name from reading it in the comic book. So that was pretty cool too. They put that in there for there's fandom, right? They're catering to, it's what I said about doing a radio show. You're doing a sports talk radio show, you got to cater to your listeners. They catered to the fandom, the people who know it. That's who they catered to. Yeah.
That's the nice thing about those. I know we'll wrap up here, but the nice thing about those shows is there's like, I got my wife in The Mandalorian. She doesn't like anything Star Wars, but she loved the first season of The Mandalorian.
Oh, awesome.
And like those shows have so many like callbacks and references to all sorts of things in the Star Wars universe that if you are nerded out and a like a really deep fan, you can appreciate those, but you don't have to, and you can still enjoy the shows.
Yeah. I tell everybody, if you haven't watched Rebels or Clone Wars, you don't have to watch all of them. You can actually watch. They have them now broken up to where you can watch them for whoever the character you like. You love Ahsoka. There's a bunch of episodes that tell you everything about her life. You want to know about Anakin, with a Padawan, you can go through all of those too. So it gives you a lot of that stuff. What's the general Grand Admiral Thrawn? If you want to know more about Thrawn and don't want to read the books, there's parts in those animated series with Thrawn in it too that you can learn more about. So there's a lot of parts to it that I love as someone who, as a kid, had very little. We had these movies and nothing else. And now I got everything. And people complain. Those people complain that we got too much. I want to kick them in. Because Because I'm like, dude, you know what I had in 1978?
Exactly.
You know what I had in 1983? I mean, we waited years to get anything, and you're complaining you got too much. Shut up.
Matt and Jeff and I talk about this all the time. Like, it's Star Wars content. Like, it's Star Wars. Just enjoy it. Just,
exactly.
Sit back and enjoy it.
Not everything has to be your favorite. Just enjoy
and everything's gonna be great. Not everything's gonna be great. We've learned that with what's happening with Disney Plus shows. We've learned that everything's gonna be great, but just take what you like out of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michael.
This has been
awesome
conversation. Super illuminating. Just love talking to you and love getting your perspective on things. We'll see if your predictions. So we'll finish by reiterating Michael's predictions. He's calling for a house call on a kickoff return against Northwestern.
Right.
And was it 27-14 Husker victory?
27-14.
27-14.
And Kevin Kugler yells at women. That's this summary of today.
just one particular one who falls down a lot. That's the only one. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Michael. Thank you for listening once again, Common fans, and we'll be back soon. GBR.
Thank you, Michael.